I want us to get to a point where we could say, oh, I screwed that up. I failed that. It's kind of like, to me, I think of it like exercise. Like if you don't tear and repair muscle, you don't get stronger. If you don't tear and repair sort of your core understanding of who you are, you don't develop a strong identity. So I want kids to have moments that feel like failure and crisis and disconnect, because that's where they really learn who they are.
Welcome to the Fresh Start Family Show. I'm your host, Wendy Snyder, powerful parenting educator and family life coach. And together we are going on a journey to help you expand your heart, learn new tools, and strengthen your family so you can build the family legacy of your dreams. I'm a mama too turned child and family advocate who went from being extremely stressed out back when my strong-willed little girl was a toddler to now thriving as a parent and having the honor to support thousands of families each year who choose to go from frazzled and impatient to peaceful and empowered. Each week, we will dive in with experts, thought leaders, authors, and advocates with insights to help you thrive in your parenting walk, as well as in your marriage and even in your career and faith walk too. Together, sometimes alone, sometimes with my better half and co-host Terry, we'll explore the triumphs and trials we all face as parents and share practical tools to fill our hearts, minds, and souls with inspiration. Take a deep breath and get ready to be poured into with some fresh start inspiration. Let's do this. Hello, families, and welcome back to a new episode. I'm so happy that you are here. Today on the show, we have Miss Michelle Icard, who is chatting with us about steps we can take to turn mistakes and failures into character building moments for both our kids and ourselves as parents. Now, this is such an important topic for me here at Fresh Start Family because this is one of the biggest areas that we support parents with is the ability to see mistakes as opportunities to learn instead of shame creating, disconnection creating, chaos creating moments. Mistakes really are the most beautiful and effective way to learn most often in life, but traditionally they have been set up as failure or something that we should be ashamed of as human beings. And we get to do it differently as we raise our little human souls and the next generation of leaders and change makers and incredible human beings. So Michelle's pretty special. She has spent over 20 years helping parents, kids, and teachers navigate the wild ride of early adolescence. She has written 3 books now. Her latest is called 8 Setbacks That Can Make a Child a Success. And this book is really where she shows parents how to turn kids' mistakes into powerful learning moments. So she is all about helping families handle the ups and downs of growing up with compassion and confidence. She is our kind of girl. And she lives in Charlotte, North Carolina. My daddy grew up in North Carolina. And she loves hanging out with her 2 young adult kids when they're around, she says. And she also is a dog mama, just like me. I love that about her. And she loves doing puzzles and hanging out with her husband. So Michelle's awesome, and you are going to love her. She is just very relatable, down to earth, and brilliant at the same time. So please help me welcome Michelle to the show. And as always, if you've never left a review for the Fresh Start Family Show over on iTunes, please know that it is the most beautiful way to say thank you for these podcast episodes that we produce for you. If any of our episodes have blessed you, inspired you, given you new ideas on how to work with your kids or how to find more joy and peace in your parenting walk, please head over to iTunes and leave us a quick review. iTunes reviews help us get seen in the iTunes world, which means we can help more and more families all across the world find more peace, find more joy, and really expand their hearts, learn new tools, and strengthen their families through the firm and kind connection-based tools that we teach and advocate for here at Fresh Start Family. So thanks for listening. And without further ado, help me welcome Michelle to the show. Well, hey there, families, and welcome to a new episode of the Fresh Start Family Show. I am excited to have Michelle Icard here today on the show with us. And we are going to be talking about 3 steps to turn mistakes and failures into character building moments for both our kids and ourselves as parents. Welcome to the show, Michelle.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
I am excited to talk about this subject matter and get to know you a little bit more today. What you write about and teach about is so important. I feel like it's one of the most essential lessons in life that we can teach our children, that mistakes are opportunities to learn, that they don't make you a bad person, and they're just essential, right? Like failure is just unfinished success. So I'm really excited to be here today with you. And we always kind of kick off our episodes with just hearing more about your story. How did you get here? How did you become an author and passionate about this subject? What part of the world do you live in? How many kiddos? How old are they? Tell us all the things, Michelle.
Sure. So I am in Charlotte, North Carolina, as we talk, and I've lived here for, I don't know, 25 or 30 years. I've lost track. I grew up in Boston and went to school in Boston, well, in Cambridge, just outside of Boston, not college, not Harvard. Everyone, when I said I went to, everyone's like, oh, high
That
school.
was my first thought. I was like, dang, are you a Harvard girl?
Doesn't it sound like a humble way of saying it? No, but prior to college, I lived in Boston and went to school in Cambridge and then went to college in Ohio and thought I would become a teacher and sort of had dreams of becoming a college professor maybe. And so I got a degree in education and I student taught. And then my first job out of school was with a legal company, and that morphed into a consulting job. So I really became a teacher, but in a corporate setting. So I did all the corporate training kind of stuff. And then the Enron scandal hit. I was working for Arthur Anderson at the time. So I was without a job. And I said, I had a baby then, and I was 7 months pregnant. And I had no maternity leave, and I needed money. And so I was panicked. And I thought, well, I really do love teaching. Everything I've done in the corporate setting has been a kind of twist on being a teacher. You know, I was like, hey, I think we need a training manual. Hey, I think we need some kind of a training day on this. So I was really drawn towards that. So I started a tutoring program, worked with kids who were in middle school, began to write curriculum for middle schoolers. And from there, things just snowballed. So out of a really yucky situation evolved this job that I love. And I've been doing it now for 20 some years.
Amazing. And so it sounds like the teaching started to happen. And then when did you decide to start writing? Because I mean, you're 3 books deep now. Is that right?
I am. 2015 was the year that my first book came out. And that came as a result of having launched the curriculum, and the curriculum was being used in schools across the country. And I was working with kids mostly, and their parents were saying, we love this. We love what our kid is coming home and telling us about this, but we need more direction. We really want to support our kids through the sort of social world of early adolescence, because that's what I focus on. But we don't know how to do that. So I thought, all right, well, I've written stuff for kids. I can write something for parents. And that's where the first book came. And then that one's Middle School Makeover. The second book is 14 Talks by Age 14. And that came out during the pandemic. And then just on the heels of that is the newest one, which is 8 Setbacks That Can Make a Child a Success.
Oh, so good. And so you really started writing when your kids were in what season of life? Because they are young adults now, right? Are they in their 20s? Is that right?
They are. So my kids are now 21 and 23. I have one who's a senior in college and one who is smack in the middle of law school. So I started doing this work when they were 2 and 4. And I started writing the book was 2015. So my daughter would have been 15. It's so easy to do the math when you have a kid born in 2000, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
she would have been 15, which means my son would have been 13, actually, when that book was published. So I would have been writing it for a year prior to that, at least.
Cool. So yeah, so you were like in you said 12 and 15, right?
Yeah, 12, 13, 14, 15, writing and publishing.
Yes. Yeah. So that's a perfect time to put this stuff into action.
I was drowning in middle school. I was living it at home. I was writing about it all the time. I was researching it. I was giving talks on it. I was, that was my 24 hours a day was middle school. And it was deeply fascinating. And I try to make it very funny because I think the awkwardness and the angst of it can be really a good opportunity to laugh if you can kind of get over yourself a little bit about it. At least
Yeah.
when you're an adult. Hard to do when you're a kid. I wouldn't expect a kid to be able to just have that same sort of reaction, but it was really fun to be immersed there for a very long, the majority of my career. I was middle school.
That's so cool. And gosh, what an essential age to, I mean, all ages are so important for children to understand that mistakes don't make you bad, and they always are opportunities to learn, but especially that middle school season and those conversations that you can start having once your kids are old enough to really comprehend, right? Like it's so beautiful. But just again, what an important subject. It's like if we can come together as a nation, as a world, as a community, culture, and really like embrace this idea as just knowing that mistakes and setbacks, there's always a beautiful lesson to be learned. It's why we are so passionate about teaching compassionate discipline here versus punishment, because if you can stay from like a teaching perspective, then there's just, especially for us, because we specialize in helping families with strong-willed kids, if you can stay in that teacher perspective and what did you learn from this mistake and how are you going to do it differently tomorrow, those kids are so much more likely to actually like retain the message, right? So talk to us about just the general idea that failure is not bad. And like, especially just as kids navigate adolescence, like, why is this such an important lesson in your opinion that we need to teach them that failure is not bad?
Yeah, failure is not only not bad, failure is great. And it's not only great, in my opinion, failure is the key to becoming a good adult. And so I really came to this concept of studying failure through the side door. I didn't go to my publisher and say, okay, I really want to research failure and think about failure for my third book. What I wanted to do was talk about rites of passage. And I wanted to pair that with the sort of inherent rights that young people have as they grow up, as they make mistakes, as they sort of flounder around and figuring out who they are and where they belong and all of that. So I've always been really interested in how different cultures and communities across time and across the globe have ushered kids through adolescence into adulthood. I just find that fascinating. And I think we've gotten really far from what works in doing that. And I think we've reached a point where we're sort of like, I guess it has something to do with their age and their privileges. So when you're 13, you get a phone. When you're 16, you get the keys to a car. You might get a big party. And those don't make you a good adult. They're fun, they're great, they're nice, they're important, but they are not the key to becoming a good adult. So what I learned through all of this is that really the key to becoming a good adult is having a challenging experience that causes you to learn something new and to grow. And then you bring that back to yourself and to your community, and everyone's better for it.
Ah, I love this. And throughout your teachings and your writings are the mistakes and the setbacks we're talking about that you speak to, are they like you failed your test or you like Stella, my poor 16-year-old, she's a smart cookie. She is like straight A student. And this darn driver's ed or the
Yeah.
learner's permit test, she's failed it twice now. And I'm like, what? Like, she's so smart. And so it seems like they sure make it very tricky here in California, but there's those type of setbacks and like things. But then there's like, because we work with so many strong-willed kids,
Yeah.
like mistakes and setbacks in their world is like, whoops, I punched my brother again. Like, whoops, I didn't listen. And like, I refused to wear my helmet and I crashed really hard and I'm really hurt now, or like all those types of mistakes. So tee up the mistakes and the setbacks, like what you're talking about, some examples that you speak to. And are we talking about all of them? Or are we talking about setbacks of like, or we had to move schools and now you're like starting over again, as far as like setbacks and mistakes?
It's such a good question. And these terms, failure and setback and even mistake, they're subjective. So they mean different things to different people. And it can be sort of vague and confusing. Like, what is this really about? So the way that I structured it, the sort of failure aspect of this is I interviewed families from all over the country. I have a parenting group on Facebook. We've got 12,000 members. So I talked to them and said, what are the things that are causing you the greatest concern right now in your child's life? What are the biggest challenges or setbacks that you're dealing with? Where do you think they're having a failure to thrive or to do well, or, whatever it might be? Then I sort of took all of their answers and found the 8 that were most universal. And I gave them each an archetype, so sort of a character type. So there's the rebel, that's failure to follow the rules. There's the daredevil, that's failure to take care of your body. The misfit is failure to perform in a way that adults see as valuable. So maybe you're just failing out of school, or you just can't connect with school the way it's set up. Ego is failure to show concern for others. The loner has a failure to connect with their peers. The sensitive one has failure to handle their feelings. The black sheep has a failure to fit in with their family. And then the bench warmer, failure to believe in themselves, failure to have confidence in themselves. So they are broad in scope, but the examples in the book are case studies. They follow real families whose kids experience these failures.
That's so cool, Michelle. I love that. And those are the failure to thrive. Okay, I get it. So yeah, so the strong-willed kid, let's say, for example, is going to be in that rebel category a lot. Like they're like failure to, another way to put it is learning to follow rules, to feel safe within rules, to understand that rules are set up for them too. Rules help keep them safe. Rules help them thrive. So it's funny how even the word failure, like because of I'm an educator, like what I do, it's funny that I shy away from even saying that, right? Like they're on a journey, they're learning, but it's like, it shouldn't be a bad word. It's like failure to thrive. They're not thriving right now. They're failing.
That's really my mission. And it's so funny. We had so many rounds of discussion. When you write a book, you don't get to pick the title. I mean, you can say, here's the title I like, here's the title I want. And then your publisher says, oh, we don't think that's going to sell. We don't think people are going to really get it. So there were rounds and rounds of figuring out the title. And everyone was like, failure makes parents itch. We can't put failure right there in the title. So the title has setbacks and then failures in the byline, but failure is throughout the book. I want to make it not a dirty word. I want it to be, I want us to get to a point where we could say, oh, I screwed that up. I failed that. It's kind of like, to me, I think of it like exercise. Like if you don't tear and repair muscle, you don't get stronger. If you don't tear and repair sort of your core understanding of who you are, you don't develop a strong identity. So I want kids to have moments that feel like failure and crisis and disconnect, because that's where they really learn who they are.
Yeah, especially strong-willed kids, because so many of them, you can tell them all day long, like, if you don't wear your shoes, you're going to step on a bee and stub your foot, right? Like, but stub your toe. And so much of the time that they are the doers, they're the touchers, like they experience so much growth through the actual experience, right? So for them, especially, failure is so important. And to be raised in a home where it's not shamed and like punished out of them, but more just firm limits, of course, firm boundaries. We're going to learn from the mistake. But for them especially, it's just like, I just remember when Stella was little, and still to this day, like Terry and I joke that like Stella needs to really, like, she'll understand and learn really, really well when she either thinks it was her idea, like, because so you get good at like helping her see how the rule or the boundary or the lesson pertains to her or serves her, right? But like after, like, you can drop a piece of wisdom with Stella. It always comes best if you share from your perspective, like, this is what I've found really helps me, or this is, before when I ran into this hiccup or couldn't find success in this area, right? If you frame it like that, she'll accept it more. But you can drop a piece of wisdom, but then we see her learn the best lessons when she goes through the hardship. And then on the other end is like, oh, okay, I see what you're talking about, Mom. She doesn't say that often, you were right, but you can sense I see why you have such a strong rule, or I see why you require this, or I see why my teacher wants me to do this. Like, they just have such an experiential need. And so teeing up failure in this capacity is I think especially important for these little souls.
I agree. And I think it's really hard for parents when they know what's right and they know what will cause, if their kid did this, it would be the path of least resistance. So can I just force my kid? Can I try to get my kid? And a story that I sometimes share about my son, who is also a very experiential learner. He had to experience it to retain it, to believe it, right? So he had braces for about 6 years growing up, and it was a long, painful, expensive process. It just took so long, and in part because he wasn't great with the rubber bands and all the stuff that could speed it along. We just sort of went through it at his pace. And when he got to the end of it, he was so sick of having stuff in his mouth, he didn't want to wear his retainer. We could have had a massive battle of wills. We could have just locked horns, and I could have been like, but you have to, like, we spent so much money and time to get here, and your teeth are going to shift. But really, short of like holding that thing in his mouth at night, there's not a lot that I could have tried threatening. I could have tried taking away everything he loves to like sort of get him to try that. But for me, I think developing and maintaining a relationship is so much more important than being right and teaching the lesson. So I just said, okay, I've done what I can do. Here we are. And now he's much older, and he has regret. I really wish I had more. And regret teaches you. We don't want kids to feel shame, but having regret is such a great teacher, because then you say, oh, I don't want to do that again. He's much better about making these decisions now that he's experienced the disappointment of not doing what he should do.
Yes. And I mean, that's a great example of a natural consequence that we teach in our compassionate discipline programs, because now that he's older and will be having a job and paying for his meal, like he might invest in Invisalign and pay the $5,000, and like, that's okay. Like that is okay. We don't need to judge it or shame it. And every Thanksgiving be like, you should have listened to me. Right. So I love, that's a great example, because it does feel very like, well, the stakes are high. It's going to waste this 3,000. We actually just got a quote for Taryn's orthodontist yesterday, and now we don't have insurance for ortho. And I was like, excuse me, what did you say? They were like $5,600. And I was like, that's impossible.
I know. It's just, and then every time you have to go in for those 15-minute checks, and it's like, it eats away at a lot of your time, pocketbook. And so you can be making a decision based on that rather than on preserving your relationship and on your child actually being allowed to, if I made him somehow, I couldn't, but let's pretend I could. He would be so mad at me. He would be, right now, he wouldn't have learned the lesson of, boy, I regret not doing that. But what he would have learned is that we don't get along, but we do. And it's great. It's so much better. So yes, we need to let kids feel the failure a little bit.
Families, let's be honest for a minute. Sometimes it can feel so hard to get your kids to just do what they're told. And if you are raising a strong-willed child, then it feels doubly hard sometimes. And so I want you to know that you're not alone. We have an easy solution for you. It's called our Firm and Kind Parenting Blueprint, and it is just $27. It is one of our easiest programs to finish, our most affordable program that we offer here at Fresh Start Family, where in just 1 hour, you can learn our magical 4-step process to setting firm limits and following through with consistency, but doing it from an angle of connection versus force. And so if you are like so many parents, you may be currently relying on threats, usually involving technology or candy or TV time. And I want you to know that there is simple tweaks that you can change that will help you get your kids to cooperate faster and do it in a way where you truly feel more deeply connected to them, less annoyed, less frustrated, and just more joyful and confident as a parent. So you can head to freshstartfamilyonline.com/firm and kind, or if it's easier, just to pop me over a DM on Instagram. I'm at freshstartwendy. Just send me the word blueprint in a DM, and I will take good care of you. I'll send you the link so you can learn more about this easy to finish, easy to implement program called our Firm and Kind Parenting Blueprint. And we can't wait for you to get started. Enjoy. Yeah. And you really could have. You could have used threats. You could have used bribery. You could
Right.
have had, just knee deep in rewards or stuff like that. And it's a beautiful choice that you made to allow that. So I love that. Well, let's get right into these 3 steps, Michelle, to turn mistakes and failures into character building moments for both our kids and ourselves as parents. And so as we talk today, I think there'll be so much connection, right? Because we know that it's all the same, whether it's us that blew up and yelled at our kids or grabbed their wrist too tight or shame them. What's wrong with you? Why can't you just be easier? Or, wish you weren't so difficult. Like, we all make mistakes as parents, right? We have those moments, and then our children have the moments too. So I think our entire conversation today is going to be a blessing to be able to apply to both of us. But I think most of the book is catered towards like seeing it in our children, right? So
Yeah, that's right. But you're right. You can apply it towards your partner, towards you, towards really anybody who's human.
yeah, human. This is a human book.
Yeah.
Okay, well, talk to us about step number 1, which is the idea to contain.
Right. So let's say that you notice your child is feeling to you like one of these archetypes I mentioned earlier. So maybe it's the rebel, maybe, oh, they're not following the rules, or maybe they're having trouble connecting with their friends, as you said, because they are strong-willed, and that might be sort of off-putting to other kids, or who knows what. But you say, I'm starting to feel like this is becoming more than a couple incidents. It's feeling like a trend here. And I think we have a problem, a sort of a crisis or a failure to connect or to follow the rules or whatever it might be. So 3 steps. The first is contain. So contain is when you say, okay, we have a problem. We're willing to say it out loud that this is an issue for this kiddo. And now we need to essentially put a Band-Aid on this and stop the bleeding so that the problem doesn't get bigger and bigger and bigger. We're going to address it right now. And sometimes that looks like containing something that's coming at your child. And sometimes it's containing your child because they're making decisions that aren't safe for them. So if your child is, a teenager and they're going out on the weekends and they're starting to experiment with substances and you're like, this is really dangerous, then you may need to contain the kid and say, you know what, we're just going to hunker down this weekend and talk and sort of figure out what's going on. Or if your child is starting to be targeted by a bully or they're receiving messages online, then the kid has done nothing wrong, but there's still something that needs containing. You may have to put up some technological boundaries so that people can't reach your kid or whatever it may be. Contain is sort of the tourniquet. You're going to stop the bleeding at the moment. A lot of times what I see is parents go, okay, done. we did it. We put up the soft spyware on the phone, or we called the counselor's office and said, hey, can you separate these kids, the class that they're in, or whatever it might be. They think of that as sort of a one and done problem solving. What I'm suggesting is that is the very first step. And that's your step to take to contain. The next step is your child's step. So it's resolve. And that means your child needs to take some action to either learn something or fix something, to make amends, to apologize, to reconnect, to rebuild trust. But this is when the ball is in their court. And in the book, I've got a huge menu of things that you can choose from. So you can look through it and have a talk with your kid and say, okay, we've done this first step. Next thing is we need you to take some action here to sort of move forward, right? Because the ultimate goal is your child does 1 or 2 things so that they begin to learn how to react and respond when they are feeling deep discomfort or pain. If they don't do that, the stakes are really high. If they don't figure out how to cope with discomfort, how to take action during times of pain, then they can really quickly develop learned helplessness. There are decades worth of studies that the default reaction to pain and discomfort is giving up. And we want our kids to know that they bounce. So I don't think what they do next is as important as doing something, right? Doesn't have to be the perfect apology, doesn't have to be perfect retribution, doesn't have to be that the light bulb goes off and they learn a beautiful lesson right in front of you, but they have to do something so that they learn that they can do something.
Oh, that right there. Okay. That is so huge, Michelle. Just that last phrase when you said, so they learn that they can do something is so different than what is normally like 90% of the time comes into our brain, like because we're culturally conditioned, the way parenting has always been done, that you can't do this.
Right.
You cannot hit your brother.
Mm-hmm.
You need to understand that you cannot talk to me like this. You cannot be failing math. Like there's so much emphasis put on the like, you are not allowed to do this. This will not be accepted. You cannot do this. And there's less emphasis put on here's all the things that you can do to
Yeah.
make amends,
Yep.
to admit where you went wrong.
Right.
Like, and when a child is in an environment where there's not shame or fear of being hurt or humiliated, then they're more likely to come forward with like, okay, I admit it. I punched him. Like
Right.
I lost my cool.
Yep.
Like, but the making amends, repairing the relationship, all that kind of stuff, like it essentially is like empowering a kid in this moment versus like the traditional way, right? Is like you beat them down a little bit more. You like, it's like I think of it as like the dog. Like I grew up in a house where the standard was like if the dog had an accident on the rug, you like took its nose. I watched my parents do this forever, and you like rubbed it in the pee. And you
Right.
were like, you don't do that. And it's like that's a lot of times what happens with modern, normal parenting, traditional parenting is like you kind of rub their nose in it and you make sure they understand how much shame and discomfort is associated with it. Whereas what you're talking about is really looking at all the things you can do tomorrow. And
I'm
like
saying,
this is where the
yeah.
learning comes in.
Yeah. Put a treat in your hand and take that dog outside and say, you
Right.
can pee here. I'm going to reinforce that with a little treat because they don't learn when you rub their nose in it, right? They might get angry or afraid, but they don't learn what to do. Maybe they'll
Right.
learn to stop going on the rug, but have they learned to go outside on the grass yet? So
And they'll
that
learn to be scared of you. They will learn to cower when you're near
yes.
them.
Exactly right. And so that's a great metaphor for this, really, that we want to replace all of that sort of shaming and browbeating and all the harmful disciplining with okay. I mean, and I'm with you, like there have to be boundaries, there have to be
Yeah.
limits and the rest of it, and that's what Contain is about. We are going to say this isn't going to stay the same as it is, and depending on where your child is, on that spectrum of archetypes, they might need really gentle guidance outside, or they might need you to
Yeah.
like quickly rush them out there. Who knows? But giving them a new place to put their energy is, I think, so important for their brains to learn.
Yeah. It's so true. Yeah. Oh, I love all of that. Okay.
Okay.
So contain, we've talked about contain. We've
Yep.
talked about resolve. And I think already like, so I'm just thinking about like all the compassionate discipline teaching and tools that we use to teach kids. And there's always already so much of where it would come in here, but I have a feeling that a lot of it is also going to come in the evolve state.
I think so. So evolve, the ball bounces back to the parent side of the court. So contain, you're doing some work. Resolve, your child really needs to take action. So important for them to know that they can, that they can move on, that they can cope, that they're resilient. And then evolve. So once they've taken that action and they've done the thing that you've sort of discussed or agreed upon, it's time for you to move past this. If you continue to keep bringing it up, seeing the same thing, I call it pressing on the bruise, then you're only going to make that child begin to believe that that's who they are, not something that they did. So there's so many ways in which parents do this and don't even realize that they're doing it. And there are two where I see parents do this most often. They have an inability to kind of evolve past the crisis of what's happened. One is with children who are failing to connect with their peers. Parents get so worried and concerned that their kids aren't happy and connected with other kids at school that they every day will ask, who did you sit next to at lunch today? And did you talk to that nice kid you were telling me about in your math class? And it can start off sincere and sweet and well-intended, and it can very quickly feel to the child like an expression of their incapacity, like they can't do it on their own, like you don't trust that they can figure this out. And a lot of times kids do better if we just back off and let them sort of go through the muck on their own. So you can be sweet and you can be kind and you can have a great snack waiting after school, but to continue to ask every day about their social standing puts a ton of pressure on a kid and makes them feel like they have to perform well socially in order to make you happy.
Yeah. So evolve, I'm hearing, is like also probably includes healing for the parents, right? So like, I think what's so fascinating and why it's just such an honor to raise other human souls, even though it is insane. Like it's the most wildest job we'll ever have, right? It's just so complex. But one of the coolest things is just you get, if you're open to it, you get to see like all the areas that you need to heal and grow and change and model what you want for your children. And this sounds like realizing like that situation you're describing is like, a lot of like the fear, like you're taking action, as you say, back the balls back in your court of like, why am I so fearful that they're never going to be able to do this? Right. And we do see that so much when we're helping parents redirect inadequacy behaviors, which is like the separation anxiety or failure to thrive in social settings. Like the more that they fear that a child can't do something, the more the child believes it. Like you don't actually have to look at a child and say, I am so scared that you're never going to have friends or never going to be able to leave my side and go to camp. They just know it. They like magically know that that is what you believe. And every single time what you're describing, like as just one example of the like, how'd you do today? Did you talk to someone? Did you like cry when I left? Like they can feel that you actually don't believe that they're capable. So, and that would highlight the idea of it's probably a good time for you to get the support that you need, whether it's through a therapist or a life coach or parenting educator or author, but really look at like, what is the underneath happening here? Why am I so triggered by this? How can I move on a little or evolve or trust that my child is capable of this growth? Is that accurate? Like, would you frame it that, or how would you frame that or riff on that?
100%. I think that it's accurate. And I think that there's nothing to reframe there. I think that that's exactly it. And I would add to it. I would say when you are really invested in how your child is performing, whether it's academically or socially or whatever, when you're really invested in that, it's too big of a burden for your child. They are likely already very invested in that for themselves. But if they think, I'm so worried about being able to do well in this class, it's hard already. But if I don't do well, not only is it going to be embarrassing for me or disappointment for me or hard for me, but my mom is going to be really freaked out. So I have to now carry all of her emotions on top of mine. And I can remember distinctly from my own middle school experience, I had a classic middle school girl experience where I was in a friendship with 3 girls. And then suddenly the 2 girls were doing a lot without me. And it took me a little while to pick up on it. And then it was like, boom, I was kicked to the curb. And I was so lonely. I was just desperate to make a connection and have a friend because I felt like we were soulmate friends. And I didn't tell my mom about it. I knew my mom would cry if I told her. She was very emotional and very invested in my happiness to a degree that it limited me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just was like, okay, I would get a tummy ache before school, but I certainly wouldn't ever say, well, I'm not friends with these girls anymore and I don't know who to sit with at lunch. And so I just floundered, kind of figured out who I would hang out with. But I will say I did tell my stepdad, who I was much closer to my mom, but my stepdad was a highly unemotional person.
Right.
And so he would just be like, well, here is some very analytical advice I can give you. And I was like, great, I could use that right now. I could use the like non-emotional, just here's what I think might be a helpful way for you to think about this. I was like, cool,
That
thank
is
you.
so cool.
Yeah.
That is so, so cool. Yeah. I'm thinking about my own journey and like areas that like right now it kind of shows up. And Taryn, my little guy, he's 13. He's broken his wrist 2 years in a row. One was skateboarding, and then the next year was like half skateboarding, half snowboarding. It was our first day on the mountain. And this is what, like one of those setbacks. Like I would look like, oh, this is a setback, right? Like, but you can come back. You can get back on the mountain. You can do this. And there is like, I can tell there's still fear. He's like my go-getter, dropping at the bowl at the skate park. Like we'll surf big waves. But he's also my kiddo that has a little separation anxiety and anxiety in general. Like that's his deal, his journey, whereas Stella's the strong-willed kid. Like they're just such different journeys. But the reason why I bring this up on this step of evolve is because there's this setback and there's the resolve part, which is empowering him. Like, how can you do your best to avoid the injuries when you're clearly in these board sports? And like we did that last year. We got the gloves that have like the wrist guard in them. And my job is to like hold the boundary because he's already asking, like, can I not wear the gloves? Because it's a thing. But I can see how I still carry a fear that he's going to get hurt. And here's one of the reasons how, and I'm saying I would like to work on this and just maybe do some journaling to work through this, or with my own coach, because when he gets hurt, so he rides like an electric motorcycle too, called a Suron. And when he crashes and he'll say, Mama, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Are you mad? Are you mad? I'm so sorry. I don't think I'm hurt. And it's been this really clear, like, dang, he's feeling some type of energy from me that I'm like a little bit still hanging on to this fear. So there must be things that I've said or something that are causing some type of like extra paranoia about getting hurt, where I would like to work on that. I would like to have him just feel empowered to take care of his body. And if he gets hurt, he gets hurt. Like he's doing these sports that are high, which all sports are, right? Like I see kids are having knee surgeries from soccer too. So, but there's something there, and I can see an opportunity for me to like learn how to be more present, to just not live in fear, because I can sense it, that he senses it in me. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes so much sense. And it's something personally that I've been thinking about a lot in my own life as well. Just we are empty nesters, but our kids come home for holidays, or like this summer will be the summer after senior year of college. So my son will likely be here before he hopefully starts a full-time job. And when transitions happen in my life, I am not good at them. I am not good at being like, I was alone and now I have a lot of people around me. And then I get really used to a lot of people around me, and then I'm not used to being alone. And I know that my kids pick up on it, and they've made little, like they can't zoom into what it is exactly. So just like you're saying, it's my responsibility to figure out what that's all about, So that's something for me and my therapist. And we are talking about that. Yeah. And the energy will be so much better with my kids home when I figure out what piece of me is struggling with that transition. So it's a real gift for your kid when you can evolve past it for them, and also through doing like your own work and figuring out why you're stuck. It's over. They did something,
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other one I was going to say, that one about friends is really hard for parents to get past. And the other one is the one that you mentioned about. It's the failure to take care of your body stuff. So it's them being physically hurt, and it's being really cautious that every time they leave the house, you aren't saying like, now remember, I don't want to get another phone call like I got before. I want you to be so careful. Let's not go through that again. Don't blah, blah, blah. But that's in the book. I have this child's Bill of Rights, and it's sort of like a little mock constitutional Bill of Rights. And they are the rights that your kids should have and deserve to have, even when they screw up. And one of them is the right to continue making mistakes. You don't just make a mistake, have an epiphany, and move on to the next thing in life. Sometimes it takes trial and error and error and error until you figure it out. And so we have to remember that. It's really, well, I don't know why we as the adults tend to think these things are one and done. Like, You had a big mistake. I got a phone call that you were drunk at a party and you spent the night throwing up and terrible hangover. And I think you've learned your lesson because it terrified me that much, right? But it's not the same for them. They have to have the experience sometimes many times in order to learn.
Yeah. That phrase that'll come up often, that'll say he or she should know better. They know better. They should know better. And then what we always see in our community is that the parent who is in a rhythm of saying that or thinking that quite often is thinking the same thing about themselves. So we always say, like, if you can learn to be more compassionate with yourself, which freaks people out because they're like always been taught that, like, you gotta be hard on yourself. Like many of us were raised with like parents that they were hard on you when you made a mistake. Yep. So that's like what was supposed to, like, in order to make a child feel better, you must first make them feel worse. You need to feel guilty. You need to feel bad. You need to be scared shitless that you're going to get hurt, like scared, danger, danger, danger. Right. And then as adults, it's like, we learn like, oh, we're supposed to be self-compassionate with ourselves and all of Brene Brown's work on shame. And we're just like, what? But it is a signal we see that, like, if you're constantly having those thoughts about your kid, like, they should know by now. They know this by now, or he should know better. Then you're probably saying that about yourself. And when you're hard on yourself, then you're hard on your kids. And when any type of like hardness versus firmness, like firm boundaries are good, following through is good, but like hardness, it just doesn't work very well to change behavior, because it's like it's like that should mentality, like you should know. But for me, I mean, I'm 13 years into this work, and I mean, it took me 8 years to stop yelling. And I raised my voice like 3 weeks ago, and it was pretty high. Like I freaked out a little bit 3 weeks ago, but I'm not in like a consistent pattern of that anymore. But for 8 years, I was still like slamming doors, and I was an educator by that point, So people think that, like, I don't know, I just feel like we've gotten the wrong idea. And we have so many community members who are just like, I'm still not able to be patient or whatever. And it does for so many of us. It takes time, it just takes time. And to build that compassion of like, you're not a bad person because you haven't mastered this skill set yet. You are learning. And every time you tear that muscle a little bit, it will come back stronger.
I absolutely love the way you framed that. That is a style and a pattern of thinking that I come across a lot, where people are just really remembering their own childhoods and deeply entrenched in like, but I can't let them screw up. If I do, it's an indictment of me, it's an indictment of them. And similar to the phrase that you just mentioned, the other one that reminded me of is, well, I didn't raise them this way. Yes. They weren't raised to do this. And I'm like, well, that's a meaningless sentence. Like, they're impulsive. So they're going to do a million things that you never anticipated or, expected. And also they're individuals, and also they're really tumultuous right now. And there are a million reasons that saying is always a bit of a flag for me, where I'm like, okay, this is an opportunity now to really think about what that means. And if it does hold true. And also, why does it matter?
Yes.
Because they did do it. So
yeah, they did. So now we get to change. If our teaching has been ineffective, right, then we just get to change. Yep. Tomorrow's a fresh start. Like, let's just teach differently tomorrow, because I have a feeling there's shame and punishment in there. But anyways, okay. Well, we have about 10 minutes left. So let's play around. I want to hear a little bit more about these archetypes. And, it seems like kids, what I found in my work is that children change, right? Like children change all through life. And we teach a lot in our programs about like the 4 categories of misbehavior. So there's going to be kids that do power struggle misbehavior. There's going to be kids that are attention seeking kids, which is my son, my daughter's power. And then there's going to be revenge misbehavior, and like there's going to be inadequacy behavior. And all kids are going to do them all of them, sometimes in one day, right? And a lot of times kids will fall into one category quite often in their childhood, right? So like I said, my daughter is pretty much always, like, every type of misbehavior we handle with her is usually power driven. And then not always, but usually. And then Taryn, it's usually attention driven or inadequacy. But with the archetypes that you talk about in the book, maybe you could review them one more time and then talk to us about, like, it's basically like, do you see that kids often fall into one? And I think you and I were going to like just think back to our teenage years and like, did we fall into one more than other? I know these can apply to all ages, right? But like,
Right.
so we can talk about that. But maybe if you could review them one more time, and then we'll just kind of riff on them for a little bit.
Okay, so there are 8. So we have the rebel, and that's a failure to follow the rules. We have the daredevil, and that's a failure to take care of their body. We have the misfit. That's a failure to perform in school the way that adults or teachers would expect you to. The ego, failure to show concern for others. The loner, failure to connect with their peers. The sensitive one, failure to handle their emotions. The black sheep, failure to get along with their family. And then the bench warmer is failure to believe in oneself. So this is very similar to in concept to what you were describing, that kids may be 4 in a day, or they may be 1, at a time. These archetypes are meant to be reassuring in the sense that, an archetype by definition is a universal sort of truth, right? So I want them to feel reassuring to parents when they can read this book and say, I recognize my child in this archetype here. You may recognize your child in 2 or 3. You may say, last month, my kid was really the sensitive one. And this month, I feel like they're the ego. I don't know how we've gone from being overly emotional to not caring a thing about what the rest of the family thinks, right? So they're fluid. Kids will just sort of weave in and out of these. And part of that evolve step, that final of the 3 steps we talked about, is we don't want to stereotype a kid and typecast them. And I don't want a kid to have an experience where they have a failure of any sort and leave that thinking, I guess I am the rebel. That's the role I'll fill in this family. My sister's a perfectionist, whatever. I'm the one who always gets in trouble. So I'll be that, right? I don't want that to happen. So we found in my own kids, and I remember from my own childhood, and certainly in the work that I've done with other families through this, that this is temporary. It's a normal part of adolescence to sort of skim through many of these at different times. I will say the most universal of all the universal archetypes here has to be the ego. Every parent of a teenager will say, here is a kid who's failing to think about others. They are putting themselves first by nature, by design, right? But the rest,
healthy development.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. You don't want it to cross a line to where it's causing problems in your family, but really normal. All of this is totally normal, typical sort of adolescent growth and development.
Yeah. I'm looking at the list and just thinking about my journey, because so I grew up in a home where my older brother, 5 years older, he's really one of the reasons why I think I went and became an educator and a family life coach. And I specialize in strong-willed kids, because I think he was the epitome of a strong-willed kid. And back in the 70s and early 80s, like, people just didn't know what to do with that. Right. So like I watched how much he struggled in our family and how much fighting and chaos there was as he got older and became a very strong, huge teenage boy who just did what he wanted, no matter how much punishment. And I mean, once you're a 6'3" guy, that like, it was just a lot to witness. Right. And so I fell into this category of kind of like, I was really smart. I got straight A's. I was like star athlete. But on the back end, oh my goodness, I was a rebel. Like I was behind closed doors partying and just all the things. Like I was really good at hiding because the shame cycle was set up so young. Like we just normal family punishment model, right? Where like, if you mess up, there's shame associated. So you just get really good at hiding the mistakes and hiding the misbehavior. So I can associate with the rebel, but really like the key to me is the black sheep. So there's like, oh my gosh, I love black sheep work. And I definitely have always felt like I was just different than the family. And I think you said it as failure to get along with the family. And I feel like I masked myself very well in teenagehood because he was so front and center, like chaos, the rebel, like everything was troubled. He dropped out of high school. I was like very good at masking and like doing what I needed to get by. But inside, I was just so different, like such different belief systems, such different, just there was definitely a lot of arguments and disagreements and just felt like such a black sheep. So I don't know. That's the one I kind of associate with when I think back to like that second decade of life for me.
Yeah.
How about you?
I'm happy that you said that, because I had not thought about this black sheep thing before. I had sort of two distinct childhoods because of our family structure. So there's pre-divorce and post-divorce, and pre-divorce. Oh my gosh, I was such a black sheep. I remember like it was like a bunch of feral cousins and drunk adults, and nobody was watching anybody, and it was scary to me. I needed structure. And now I can remember thinking like, doesn't anyone want to read a book? Like I just really used to like tuck myself up with a little book and needed the quiet and needed that while it was chaos around me.
Yeah.
So I was total black sheep in the early part. Then post-divorce and my mom remarried. And then I was for sure the sensitive one, highly anxious, overstimulated, nervous little kid with all of these changes in my life. I had just an incredible amount of anxiety and fear and worry about the adults in my life, a lot of that, which morphed into, just like you, the rebel, where I was like, well, if I'm going to be a teenager who has a normal teenage experience, I'm going to have to sneak around in order to do it, because in this new, really strict family structure, which like chaos came into this very strict situation. And then I was like, I do want to go to parties, and I would like to kiss boys, and I do want to have, all this stuff. And I want to try a clove cigarette, like stupid stuff, because I'm 51. So this would have also been like the 80s high school time, and teasing my hair and trying to look hot and going to parties. And there was a lot of rebellion there and a lot of sneakiness that came with that.
Yeah, that's kind of fun to think back to your teenage. Yeah, I mean, it was like, it's crazy. It's wild, but it's also just, it's nice for me right now because raising teenagers, I just find so much connection with them when I can think back and just get into your body a little bit. And so that's fun. So yeah, but all of it is just kids figuring out how to navigate life. And, this book and your work, Michelle, is so beautiful. And I can just see how supportive this will be and is for families. So thank you for being committed to supporting families in this way. And I'm really excited for all of our listeners to grab your new book. We'll make sure we add it to our shop page. We have a huge collection of our favorite books over there. So we'll make sure we add it. We'll add it in the show notes too. But will you finish us off with where listeners can find you and come support you and your work and learn more?
Thank you. Yes, I'd love to. So find me on Instagram. It's just my full name. So Michelle with 2 L's, and the last name is spelled Icard. So Michelle Icard on Instagram. My website is the same thing, Michelle Icard. And those are probably the best 2 spots to come find me. I have a public page on Facebook. It's Michelle Icard, author and speaker. So if you just Google that very unusual name, you're going to find me pretty quickly.
Heck yeah. Oh, I love it. Well, Michelle, thank you again for being here. I hope you have such a good rest of your day. Listeners, thanks for being here, and go give Michelle a follow and support her and grab her new book.
Hooray! You made it to the end of a Fresh Start Family Show episode. Thank you so much for being here. If you have a quick second, make sure you hit subscribe to our show so you can be updated when our new episodes drop. I will see you back soon for the next episode.
All right, now is a great time to head to freshstartfamilyonline.com/firm and kind to grab the Firm and Kind Parenting Blueprint, our $27 mini course that will teach you our easy to implement yet magical in terms of results 4-step process to setting strong limits and sticking to them with consistency. Enjoy.